Good afternoon, all. Hope you all doing good. So I'm here to deliver the welcome address today. So I am Sasireka from Madurai, pursuing my BSc CS Security Systems specialization at Subbalakshmi Lakshmati College of Science. So it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar on privacy, cyber privacy 2024. So Data Privacy Day originally focused on raising awareness among businesses and as well as users about the importance of protecting the privacy of their personal information online, particularly in the context of social networking. This webinar aims at providing an overview of security versus privacy versus anonymity. Now, I would like to welcome and introduce our speaker of the day, Mr. Abhijeet Kumar. He's a security researcher focused on red team operations and network security, currently working at Cyber Warfare Labs. His day-to-day activities include conducting R&D on red team projects, researching and emulating adversarial TTPs, and reading tons of documentation during his tenure at Cyber Warfare Labs. He has delivered webinars on offensive OSINT and CoFish OPSEC. Additionally, he developed a Debian-based OS for cloud adversarial operations named Red Cloud OS as one of the company's public projects. He has authored one national level research paper and contributed two chapters on the book titled Perspectives on Ethical Hacking and Penetration Testing. So I feel glad to welcome Mr. Abhijeet Kumar. I'm confident that you will find new ideas and fresh energy. Once again, I welcome you all.
Okay. Thank you. Can you please make me host? I'm unable to share this screen. Okay. I hope you all can see the screen. Can someone please confirm? Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So today, we are just talking about this topic, that is the concept of security, privacy, and anonymity. So it's a bit about me. It's not relevant. And here is where the relevant part starts. So we often at our day-to-day life, we hear these terms, that is security, privacy, anonymity. And most of the times these terms are used interchangeably. So for example, if the app position for the word, like, if the app scenario is for privacy, people use security, or maybe they use anonymity, and vice versa. So privacy, if you want to understand privacy, it is something of a concept where we keep some of our things private. For example, um and please do not take this as wrong. I have a bad tendency to take very not so good examples. So here it goes, apologies in advance. So imagine a scenario where you are spending some quality time with your significant half. You definitely wouldn't want anyone to see you spending that time. So that is the concept of privacy. So it is something we keep private. We do not tell others, or we do not show others. So it is the concept of privacy, just disclosing or just sharing what you want or what you want them to see. Now comes the concept of security. So security is something, or you can say some practices or some precautions that you take to feel safe or secure, or be in a state of being where you are protected. So to take an example, so let's say you feel threatened by some reasons. So you decided to hire a bodyguard. In this case, well, you are secured because you have a bodyguard. That bodyguard might have a gun, or might have a bazooka or something. Anyways, so in this case, you are secure. But at the same point of time, that bodyguard is privy to your conversations, your day-to-day activities, whatever you are doing, wherever you are doing. So that means we have compromised privacy at some level to feel secure. Moving on comes the concept of anonymity. And to be very frank, I do not believe that true anonymity exists in 2024. And there are many reasons, and we will touch upon it at a bit later point. But simply to understand anonymity, it is something of a concept where you do something, but no one can know that it was you. So, to take an example, so um, when I was in school many moons back, so we had some students like who were very shararati or naughty. So they used to pull pranks on teachers. So let's say like putting chalks away, or let's say like wiping something, or just doing some activities in the classroom. So in that case, like when teacher was writing something at the board, students were doing something else. And to the students of the class, the perpetrators, they were identifiable. We knew who these guys or girls were, but the teacher didn't knew. So for teachers, these perpetrators, they were anonymous, but to us, the students, they were not. So this is also something to keep in mind, because um, at everything, like at the very core of it, these things comes down to how you plan your threat model, like who are your adversaries, whom you are trying to hide from, or whom you are trying to feel safe from. And it differs from person to person. For example, my threat model, it is very different from the other threat model, other like someone else's threat model, and so on and so on and so on. So it differs. So for example, like we will see it in the next slide. So first, the how like the data is collected about us. So one of the I think most widely used data collection mechanism is Google search. And for those of you who do not know, Google is an ad-based company. So the majority of Google's revenue is only um, gathered through the ads. And these ads, like anyways, we'll see it in a later point. So anyways, so first is the website, and then there are social media platforms, like for example, you use Facebook, or you use Instagram, you use TikTok, whatnot. Whatever of these platforms you use, they collect certain data about you. And then there comes the laptops, smartphones, smart devices, and how they collect is like, for example, if you're using Windows, so Windows uses some sort of telemetries, like telemetries are some sort of data that they gather about you. These data, like they kind of gather from the diagnostics, or from certain services, or certain applications they have installed. For example, um, if you are using Cortana, well, the Cortana's data is processed in the Azure cloud. So Microsoft has access to that data. And if you are using Windows on your default settings, so there are also a good amount of data that they actually collect. So if you go to your settings, and if you try something like some category like privacy, so you will see like they collect certain data. Like if you go to microphones, or like if you go to device activity, so you will see like there are a good number of options that are ticked, and that is how Microsoft collects data. And Microsoft is not alone in this. And at a very same point, like we are talking about privacy, but again from the perspective of security, it is necessary to have some sort of data. Sorry. Sorry, can you speak in English? I didn't get you. Hello? Okay, Pranav. Okay. So It is actually necessary at some extent to gather these data because it actually helps prevent some certain disasters, but at the very same time, it should not be intrusive. It should not be like invading the privacy of the other people. Anyways, moving on. So that is the example of how an operating system such as Windows collects data. And another example is certain services like if you are using, let's say, certain apps on Windows. So they also contribute to this data collection, and it's very subtle. Like some of these apps collect only one or two data points, and some of these apps collect many of the data points. And once combined, it puts a very uh, comprehensive picture of user, which is something I'll just talk about in a bit. And then comes the smart devices. So every one of us, like almost every one of us owns at least one smartphone, be it Android, Apple. Like I mean, these two are the majority. Like there was a time when Windows-based OS or Brada-based OS of Samsung were popular, but not anymore. Anyways, so after smartphones, there are smartwatches, then there are smart home appliances, and this actually reminds me of a very um, hilarious thing. So I think couple years back, um, one of my connection on LinkedIn shared a post like she was just doing some activities she was just checking her network and she figured out that her smart drill, it was actually hosting a web server and had I think 2 or 3 GB of data. I mean, to this very day cannot comprehend why a smart drill would need to run a web server, much less like hosting 3 4 GBs of data. Anyway, so once these data points are collected, so these collection companies share or sell this user data to other companies, other entities. Like these entities, they could be other ad-based companies, they could be analytics companies, they could be governments, they could be shell companies, proxy companies, and whatnot. And in the very end, this data is used for user profiling and targeted advertisement. And if we take it seriously, advertisement is the least of the concern. And to quote one example, so there is one very good documentary on Netflix, and if I recall the name correctly, it's the Great Hack. This hack is about 2016 US elections and a company named Cambridge Analytica. So what they did was they partnered with Facebook and other social media companies, and they gathered data about the users, and then they used that data to show targeted ads to the user and change like they actually change the perception of certain candidates and just turn it 180. So if you get some time, if you have a Netflix subscription, just watch this movie. It was something of a very um very traumatic moment for me, like when I was watching that movie, because if that was possible, like um, in the US, it could have been done anywhere and where people none the wiser. So, anyways, let's see. So, this is how the normal traffic flows. So, this one is kind of the normal traffic, like how we usually interact with the devices on the internet. So, we have our client, and let me see if I can find some pointer or something. So, just a minute. Mm, yeah. So, this is our client. And once the client interacts with wants to interacts with the internet, so they need to have some sort of data plan, right? Like maybe it could be your cellular data plan, it could be your Wi-Fi plan and whatnot. So they need to get a plan, and for that plan you need to have someone named as an internet service provider or ISP. So this is your ISP. This ISP, what it does is it provides you a means to actually interact with the internet, and this is your internet. And do pardon my drawings, it's something um anyways. So once you get the ISP, so your traffic is routed. So you see the first arrow, this arrow, it means your traffic is going to ISP. ISP then passes this traffic to internet. But whatever traffic you are sending, your ISP is privy to whole of that traffic, the entirety of the traffic, whatever, which website you are connecting with, what device you are using, what is time in your local phone, local device, and then it is privy to everything. Like if the traffic is encrypted, ISP cannot decrypt it unless they have the private keys, but they can see the metadata, and that is also something um, very widely used for tracking people. So once the traffic leaves the ISP, it goes to the internet and then goes to the respective server or websites or wherever you are using. So this is how a normal traffic flow looks like. And if we talk about the VPN, so VPN is kind of a virtual private network. And I just have to figure out how to delete this. I am I have only used Zoom for the like kind of the um session. So just yeah, okay, deleted. Yeah. Anyways, so how this VPN or virtual private network works is it provides you kind of a secure gateway through which you can connect to the internet without snooping from the ISP. And essentially, what it does at a very high level is it replaces your ISP. It eventually becomes your ISP. And there are certain considerations while you are thinking about using a VPN. So, uh, essentially, since the VPN provider they become your ISP, it is something. It must be some provider you are comfortable with. You have done well research on the provider. You know they have certain good policies. I mean, research about it before implementing or using. So, anyways, so what it does is, so if you see some green padlocks, so here are two green padlocks. So essentially, this traffic between the client and the VPN server, it's encrypted by your VPN provider's private keys. So ISP cannot see it. ISP will only see that the traffic is going to this IP, this VPN provider's IP, and that's it. After that, the traffic will go normally to the internet and then to respective servers or services. One thing to note is only the connection between the client and the VPN server is encrypted. So this only this portion is encrypted. So if you are using simple traffic like HTTP traffic, that is your hypertext transfer protocol traffic, so it is not encrypted. If you are using HTTPS, like which is HTTP with TLS or SSL, so that is encrypted. But if you're using something, so anyone can snoop because only the boundary between client and VPN server is protected. So let's move on. And this is your TOR. So TOR is something known as the onion router. It is a kind of a way of multiple chained proxies, which helps you evade the detection. And how Tor works is like we still have our client, we still have our ISP, but Tor creates sort of a gateway between your client and the internet so that the data is kind of traveling through an encrypted tunnel, similar to the VPN. but there are certain differences. Like Tor is not a VPN, and a VPN is not a Tor. And how is it? We will just see. So in this case, like once you install the Tor client, it starts sort of a server like service on your system ports. By default, the port is I think 9050. And once it starts, it creates a tunnel to the Tor entry node. So it goes to an entry node, and this entry node knows only the IP of the client. Then this entry node, and let me just annotate it. So this entry node, it notes that this client, this IP, send me here, and it forwards data traffic to the middle node. Middle node only knows that I am being forwarded this data by this store entry node. So it only knows about the existence of the entry node. And similar thing happens to the exit node. So it is something, a concept we call forward privacy or forward secrecy. So only these nodes, they only know the IP of the immediate previous one, the last one. So it is something of a very good implementation that actually keeps you bit more secure, or for the lack of like better words, it keeps you private. It keeps your data traffic private, and then the traffic goes to the internet and so on, so on, so on. So it's the very same thing. So what we can do is like we saw in the previous slide about the VPN, and we saw in this slide about the Tor. So what if we combine these two, like the power of the two? So in this case, what we are doing is we are first starting our VPN client. We are connecting to the VPN. So in this case, ISP will only know that I am connected to a VPN. And in the previous case, this Tor case, so ISP knows that I am getting connected to a Tor node, because Tor nodes IPs are like they are publicly available. They can be audited. You can check. You can determine whether a given IP is Tor node or not. So in this case, what we will be doing is we will starting the VPN first. We will connecting to VPN first, and then we are connecting to the Tor. So it is kind of a layered system. So in this case, if I annotate it, so here to here, we are connected by the VPN tunnel. After this, VPN tunnel forwards traffic to the Tor, and then Tor takes it over, and these are three bubbles. And I just got a notification that meeting will end in 10 minutes. So I'll be very brief. So this is how it's working. So in the first bubble, we have client, ISP, and the VPN server. In the second bubble, we have the VPN server and Tor's entry node. And then in the third one, we have the Tor network itself. So at every level, we are using some sort of precaution, some sort of prevention. And this is mainly to keep our traffic private. Essentially, it doesn't makes one anonymous. And that is because like if you are using VPN, so if someone is having some good level of resources, for example, nation state actors, like people with let's say government level access and government level resources, so they can essentially identify like you are using this VPN server, and there is a concept of asynchronous system numbers, ASNs, which are allocated to the different providers, ISPs, and they can also be used to track it. Like because every provider is something unique. So, for example, if you are using Reliance, Jio, or Airtel, so they have their own IPs. If you are using VPN providers like Malwad or Proton or like any other provider, so they also have their ASNs. So they can be identified. So in this case, you are kind of using a dual mechanism to thwart Still, it's not perfect. It's still not your like kind of a one-stop solution. So make sure that whenever you are using, again, it will be kind of very dependent on your own threat model. So for example, in some cases you might want to thwart the scammers who are targeting you online, or maybe you want to get rid of some stalkers, or in some cases, like if you are a journalist, you maybe journalist who is operating in a like oppressive regime, so you might want to escape the government. You might not want to know the government that you are working on something that can be very not so good for the government but good for the people. So in that case, it's like you have to um, create your own different threat models, and this is what also I started, like I said at the very beginning. So threat model is different for everyone, and it differs from every people, or person can have like different threat models for different scenarios. Like for example, like if one is staying in a country, so they can have different threat models. But when let's say they are going to the vacation on another country, so they will have different threat models, because in that case, let's say you are going to a country and that country might seize your laptops or your devices, and if you have something confidential in them, it could be extracted. So this was actually the gist of it. uh, Hopefully at a later point I will get the opportunity to dive more into it, kind of talk more about these things. And this is just the session. And just to give a shout out, so this PPT, it's uh, powered by a software that is known as LibreOffice. It is kind of the open source software, and this CC by SA is Creative Commons by shared attribution. So just to highlight, this is the free software. So now I'm done. I would very much appreciate if you guys can ask any questions. If you can ask with your microphone, that is also fine. If you want to ask in chat, that is also fine. So yeah, and thank you, Cybercaller, for this opportunity. And hope everyone is become conscious about their privacy, and how to operate in this ever-changing digital world. Any questions? Could you please tell the difference between proxy and VPNs? Okay. Proxies are kind of they are a gateway. So with the help of proxy, you can only kind of filter. Like proxies are mostly used for filtering traffic. They're not VPNs, and that is how. Because once you're using a proxy, so it is kind of taking the input from your backend and it is forwarding it to someone in the front end. Like if it is a forward proxy, like there are different proxies, forward proxies, which is forwarding data from user to internet, and there are reverse which forward traffic from internet to user. So that is the concept of proxies. Like it is mostly for filtering and data forwarding. However, VPN is something of a more complex term. VPN has different protocols. They have different data security mechanisms, encryption standards, and these standards, these encryption, these are not available in proxies by default. There are very rare proxies that might do this, because the work of a proxy is to act on behalf of a user to perform certain tasks, while the VPN is providing the user are entirely different IP address, or entirely different, let's say, identity, for the lack of better word. So that is your VPN, which is giving you another IP, another identity, and there is IP which is fetching resources, or which is sending resources on your behalf. So that is the difference. Does all organization use? Uh, no, Shashi, it actually depends upon the organization. So most of the organization, they actually use a VPN for connecting to their internal services. So for example, they can have something running inside their internal network and they create a tunnel like publicly, and that internal network, it is not accessible from the outside. And then they create a VPN tunnel from internet, which can be used to access that private network. So, and Jordan, what should one consider while searching for a reputable VPN provider? So, um, first you have to consider where the provider is based and what are the local laws. So, for example, in some countries, the government can actually force the provider to hand over the logs or hand over the data. And that is the first thing, like the country of origin of provider, like where the servers are located, and what are the privacy and security policies of that particular country. Then you should check whether what are the policies of the provider itself, uh, do they offer no log services? Do they keep logs of your interactions? From which server you connected, which IPs you use? Do they keep these kind of records? That would be the second. Third would be is your software, like the software you are using, is it open source or is it closed source? Because in open source softwares, you can usually check or audit for the backdoors, but in the closed source ones, it's kind of packed. So you cannot actually tear it apart and look for the backdoors legally, because that would be breach of the terms of services. So for example, like majority of softwares we use, they especially forbid like reverse engineering the software. So that is the third point. Then you have to look into the providers' reputations, who are behind the organization, where this organization is getting funding from. So for example, and this is my own opinion, if a government entity is funding a VPN provider, I personally do not think that that would be provider I will go with. Is Abhinav, is the premium VPN services best or free service? So see, Abhinav, the thing is, free is almost always a trap, because if something is free, then either you are the product or your data is the product. So, whatever provider you stick with, make sure you have done a good research on the providers. Check their website reviews, talk with the other companies, or talk with the people who are using it. And then there is one other term, that is canary. So, when law enforcement uh, seizes or checks some providers, so they actually publish some sort of canary. So this concept comes from the